Was it really an accident? Could something sinister have been at play? When celebrities and prominent figures die in plane crashes, questions often linger long after the wreckage has been cleared. Number 9. Aaliyah, the rising star silenced too soon. Have you ever wondered what really happened on that fateful day in the Bahamas? The world lost a shining talent on August 25, 2001, when R&B superstar Aaliyah Dana Houghton boarded a small twin-engine Cessna for what should have been a routine flight from Marsh Harbor to Florida. At just 22 years old, Aaliyah had already accomplished what most artists could only dream of achieving in a lifetime. With hit albums, successful acting roles, and a distinctive style that influenced a generation, she was poised to become one of the biggest stars of the decade. The circumstances surrounding the crash raised eyebrows from the start. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 9 people aboard. Investigators later discovered the aircraft was significantly overloaded by hundreds of pounds. The pilot, Louis Morales III, wasn't even authorized by the FAA to fly the plane, and toxicology reports later revealed he had traces of cocaine and alcohol in his system. What's more disturbing is that witnesses reported Aaliyah and her team were initially reluctant to board the small aircraft, expressing concerns about the plane being overloaded with their equipment and luggage. Despite these concerns, they eventually got on the plane after reportedly being assured it was safe. The record company's rush to get Aaliyah back to the United States after her music video shoot has led some to question whether proper safety protocols were ignored in favor of keeping to a tight schedule. The plane crashed just 200 feet from the end of the runway, nosediving into swampy terrain. 2 decades later, fans still wonder if this tragedy could have been prevented and whether the full story of what happened that day has ever truly been told. Number 8. John F. Kennedy Jr., America's Prince. Did the inexperience of a pilot born into American royalty lead to his demise, or was something else at play? On July 16, 1999, the son of the assassinated president took off from New Jersey in his Piper Saratoga aircraft headed for Martha's Vineyard. Aboard were Kennedy, his wife Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and her sister Lauren Bessette. The plane never arrived at its destination. Kennedy, who had received his pilot's license just a year earlier, was flying under what pilots call marginal conditions, hazy skies with limited visibility. He was not certified for instrument-only flight, relying instead on visual cues from the horizon and landscape. As darkness fell over the Atlantic Ocean, those visual references would have disappeared. Search efforts located the wreckage several days later in the waters off Martha's Vineyard. The official NTSB investigation concluded the crash was most likely the result of spatial disorientation, where a pilot's perception of the aircraft's position becomes confused when visual references are lost. But some questions remain unanswered. Why did Kennedy decide to fly despite the deteriorating conditions when he could have easily chartered a flight or taken a commercial airline? Did he feel pressure to maintain his schedule for his cousin's wedding? Some have suggested that Kennedy's famous determination, a trait inherited from his father, may have contributed to his decision to proceed with the flight despite the risks. The crash seemed to reinforce the idea of a Kennedy curse, the notion that America's most famous political family was somehow destined for tragedy. The death of John F. Kennedy Jr., who many believed might one day follow his father's path into politics, cut short another chapter in the Kennedy legacy. Number 7. Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper, The Day the Music Died. What caused 3 rock and roll pioneers to perish in a snowy Iowa field? February 3, 1959 is forever etched in music history as the day the music died, when a small plane crash claimed the lives of Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, known as the Big Bopper. The musicians had been performing as part of the Winter Dance Party tour, traveling between venues in cold, uncomfortable buses with faulty heating. After a show in Clear Lake, Iowa, Holly, tired of the freezing bus conditions, chartered a small Beechcraft Bonanza plane to take him to the next stop in Moorhead, Minnesota. Originally, Holly's backing musicians, including Waylon Jennings, were supposed to fly with him. In a twist of fate that would haunt him for the rest of his life, Jennings gave up his seat to Richardson, who was suffering from the flu. Meanwhile, Ritchie Valens, who had never flown in a small plane before, won his seat in a coin toss with Tommy Alsup. The 21-year-old pilot, Roger Peterson, was relatively inexperienced with the instrument flying required for night conditions. Shortly after takeoff at around 1 a.m. during light snow and strong winds, the plane crashed just 5 miles from the airport, killing everyone on board instantly. The Civil Aeronautics Board determined that the primary cause of the crash was pilot error, citing Peterson's inability to recognize his position and altitude from his instruments in the poor weather conditions. However, some have questioned whether the full story has been told. In 2007, a pilot named L.J. Kuhn petitioned the National Transportation Safety Board to reopen the investigation, suggesting that other factors such as weight distribution or problems with the rudder might have contributed to the crash. The NTSB eventually declined to reopen the case. What makes this crash particularly poignant is how it altered music history. Buddy Holly, just 22, had already influenced countless musicians with hits like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day. Ritchie Valens, only 17, had broken barriers as one of rock's first Latino stars with La Bamba. And the Big Bopper, 28, had just scored a massive hit with Chantilly Lace. One can only wonder what these pioneers might have accomplished had they lived. Would Holly have continued to revolutionize rock music? Would Valens have further bridged Latin and American music? The questions linger like the haunting lyrics of Don McLean's American Pie, which immortalized the tragedy. Number 6. Jenny Rivera, the Mexican-American superstar's final flight. How did a successful plane with an experienced crew suddenly drop from the sky? On December 9, 2012, Latin music lost one of its brightest stars when Jenny Rivera, the diva of banda music, died in a plane crash in northern Mexico. Rivera, 43, had just performed a concert in Monterrey and boarded a private Learjet 25 headed for Toluca, near Mexico City. The aircraft, carrying Rivera and 6 others including her publicist, lawyer, makeup artist, and 2 pilots, departed around 3:15 a.m. Just minutes after takeoff, the plane disappeared from radar screens. The wreckage was later discovered in the mountainous terrain of Sierra Iturbide in Nuevo Leon, Mexico. The impact was so severe that the plane was almost completely destroyed, with debris scattered over a large area. There were no survivors. What makes this crash particularly mysterious is that the Learjet was flying at around 28,000 feet when it suddenly entered a steep descent, plunging more than 28,000 feet in less than a minute, a nearly vertical drop. Such a dramatic and catastrophic failure is unusual, even in adverse conditions. The official investigation by Mexican authorities suggested that the crash might have been caused by a failure in the horizontal stabilizers, or possibly a sudden loss of control when the 78-year-old pilot suffered a heart attack or similar medical emergency. However, without a flight data recorder, the plane was too old to require one. Investigators couldn't definitively determine what happened in those final moments. Adding to the mystery were reports that the same aircraft had been damaged in a 2005 accident when it struck a runway marker in Amarillo, Texas. Though repairs were made, questions lingered about whether the plane was truly airworthy. Rivera's family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the aircraft's owners, Starwood Management, and against the previous owners of the aircraft, claiming negligence in maintenance and operation of the jet. The lawsuit alleged that the pilot was not licensed to carry passengers for hire and that the plane's co-pilot was not properly licensed to fly the aircraft at the altitude they were traveling. At the time of her death, Rivera was at the peak of her career, having sold over 15 million records and becoming the first female banda artist to sell out the Gibson Amphitheater in Los Angeles. Her reality show, I Love Jenny, was one of the highest-rated programs on Spanish-language television. Her final concert, performed just hours before the crash, was recorded and later released posthumously. The abrupt end to Rivera's life story left her fans wondering not only what caused the crash but also what heights her career might have reached had she lived. Was it simply mechanical failure, or did other factors contribute to the tragedy? Number 5. Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN Secretary-General's unsolved demise. Was it truly an accident, or was one of the most influential peace brokers of the 20th century actually assassinated? The mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of United Nations Secretary-General Dag Hammarskjöld continue to fuel speculation decades after his plane crashed in the African bush. On the night of September 17 to 18, 1961, Hammarskjöld was on a peace mission to Congo, flying from Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, to Ndola in northern Rhodesia, now Zambia, to negotiate a ceasefire in the Congo crisis. His DC-6 aircraft, known as the Albertina, crashed near Ndola, killing Hammarskjöld and 15 of the 16 people aboard. The sole survivor died days later. The crash occurred during a critical moment in African decolonization, with significant mining interests at stake in the mineral-rich Katanga province that had seceded from Congo. As the UN's top diplomat, Hammarskjöld had been working to resolve the crisis in a way that would preserve Congo's unity and independence, a position that potentially threatened powerful Western mining companies and Cold War strategic interests. Official inquiries at the time concluded the crash was due to pilot error, but inconsistencies in the evidence and testimony immediately raised suspicions. Witnesses reported seeing the plane explode in mid-air or being fired upon. The aircraft was found well off its expected approach path, and there was an unexplained delay of several hours before search efforts began, despite the plane being overdue. Perhaps most suspiciously, Hammarskjöld's body was found with an ace of spades playing card tucked into his collar, a detail that has never been adequately explained but resembles a calling card sometimes left by mercenaries or assassins. The mystery deepened in 2011 when a book by British researcher Susan Williams, Who Killed Hammarskjöld, presented new evidence suggesting the possibility of foul play. This prompted the United Nations to reopen the investigation. In 2015, a panel headed by former Tanzanian Chief Justice Mohamed Chande Othman found that there was significant new information that merited further inquiry. In recent years, previously classified documents from various intelligence agencies have gradually come to light. Some suggest that mercenary pilots may have been involved in forcing the plane down, potentially with the knowledge of Western intelligence agencies. In 2019, a documentary called Cold Case Hammarskjöld claimed to have identified a former mercenary who confessed to shooting down the plane on orders from intelligence agencies concerned about Hammarskjöld's policies. The UN's continuing investigation has been hampered by the reluctance of certain countries, including the US, UK, and South Africa, to fully declassify relevant intelligence files. In 2017, the current UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres appointed Judge Othman to continue the investigation, noting that the whole truth, regardless of what it is, must be established. More than 60 years after the crash, the full truth about Hammarskjöld's death remains elusive. Was it truly an accident caused by pilot error in difficult night flying conditions? Or was it, as many evidence points suggest, something more sinister, the assassination of a world leader whose vision for African independence and global equity threatened too many powerful interests? Number 4. Rocky Marciano, the undefeated champion's final journey. Did fate deal the only undefeated heavyweight boxing champion in history his only knockout? On August 31, 1969, the sports world was stunned when Rocky Marciano died in a plane crash on the eve of his 46th birthday. Marciano, whose perfect 49-0 professional record still stands as one of boxing's most impressive achievements, was traveling in a small Cessna 172 from Chicago to Des Moines, Iowa. The fighter was making a surprise visit for a friend's son's birthday party when the plane encountered a thunderstorm near Newton, Iowa. The pilot Glenn Bells had only 231 total hours of flying experience and wasn't certified for instrument flying, the technique required when visibility is poor. As night fell and weather conditions deteriorated, Bells apparently attempted to land at a small airfield near Newton but struck a tree 2 miles short of the runway. The crash killed Marciano, Bells, and another passenger instantly. What makes this crash particularly intriguing is Marciano's well-known fear of flying. Throughout his boxing career, he had often chosen to travel by train or car rather than airplane. Friends reported that Marciano would usually drive himself to events or take alternative transportation whenever possible. Why then did he agree to fly in a small, single-engine plane with an inexperienced pilot in poor weather conditions? Some have suggested that Marciano's legendary toughness, the same quality that helped him overcome bigger opponents in the ring, might have led him to downplay the risks associated with the flight. Others have wondered if he felt pressured to make the journey to keep his promise to attend the birthday celebration. Another layer of mystery comes from the timing of the crash. Marciano had successfully transitioned to a comfortable life as a businessman after retiring from boxing in 1956 at the relatively young age of 32. He was one of the few champions to leave the sport on his own terms, with his health and finances intact. Had he lived, many boxing historians believe he could have been an influential figure in the sport for decades to come. The tragedy became even more poignant when it was revealed that Marciano's family had prepared a surprise birthday party for his return. Instead of celebrating, they mourned the loss of the humble champion who had grown up the son of Italian immigrants in Brockton, Massachusetts, and fought his way to the pinnacle of his sport through sheer determination. While the official cause of the crash was pilot error exacerbated by bad weather, questions remain about what might have been averted had different decisions been made that day. Could Marciano have insisted on postponing the flight due to weather? Did the pilot feel pressure to proceed despite conditions that exceeded his capabilities? We'll never know for certain. Number 3. Jim Croce, a storyteller silenced. What caused the plane carrying one of America's most beloved singer-songwriters to crash just as his career was soaring? On September 20, 1973, after performing at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana, Jim Croce boarded a small Beechcraft E-18S charter plane bound for his next show in Sherman, Texas. The plane never gained proper altitude after takeoff and crashed into a tree at the end of the runway, killing all 6 people aboard instantly, including Croce, his guitarist Maury Muehleisen, and members of his touring staff. Croce was just 30 years old. What makes this crash particularly painful for music fans is the timing. After years of struggling in the music business, Croce had finally achieved breakthrough success with hits like Bad, Bad Leroy Brown, Time in a Bottle, and You Don't Mess Around with Jim. His latest album was climbing the charts, and he was scheduled to release his next single, I Got a Name, the day after the crash. The NTSB investigation cited pilot error as the probable cause, suggesting that the 57-year-old pilot, Robert Elliott, failed to gain sufficient altitude to clear the obstacles at the end of the runway. The report noted that the airport was not equipped with lights to illuminate trees and terrain beyond the runway, and the nighttime departure made it difficult for the pilot to judge distances properly. However, some have questioned whether other factors might have contributed to the crash. The charter company that operated the flight had experienced other incidents, raising questions about maintenance procedures and operational standards. The plane itself was nearly 30 years old, having been built during World War II. There were also reports that the pilot may have been fatigued, having flown multiple segments that day. In the era before strict regulations on pilot rest periods, it wasn't uncommon for charter pilots to fly extended hours to accommodate client schedules. Croce had reportedly been contemplating a change in his career direction, feeling the strain of constant touring and time away from his family. In a letter written to his wife Ingrid shortly before his death, but not delivered until after the crash, Croce wrote about his desire to cut back on touring and spend more time writing and being with his family, including their 2-year-old son, AJ. That letter has fueled speculation about what might have been. Would Croce have continued his meteoric rise in the music industry? Would he have transitioned to a less demanding schedule that might have allowed for even more thoughtful songwriting? His storytelling abilities and knack for creating vivid characters in his songs suggested an artist with much more to give. In a bittersweet twist of fate, Croce's Time in a Bottle, a deeply personal song written after learning his wife was pregnant, was released as a single after his death and became his second #1 hit. The lyrics, which speak poignantly about the fleeting nature of time, took on new meaning in the wake of his untimely death. Number 2, Lynyrd Skynyrd, When the Music Stopped. How did a routine charter flight turn into one of rock music's greatest tragedies? On October 20th, 1977, Southern rock band Lynyrd Skynyrd was traveling from Greenville, South Carolina to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, aboard a chartered Convair CV-240 aircraft. The band had just released their 5th album, Street Survivors, and was in the midst of a headlining tour. As the plane approached the end of its fuel supply, the pilots reported engine problems and attempted an emergency landing on a small airstrip in Gillsburg, Mississippi. The aircraft crashed in heavily wooded terrain, killing lead vocalist Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, backup singer Cassie Gaines, Steve's sister, assistant road manager Dean Kilpatrick, and both pilots. The other band members and crew survived, though many sustained severe injuries. What turned this from a tragic accident into an enduring mystery were the circumstances surrounding the flight. Band members had previously expressed concerns about the aging aircraft, with some reportedly even contemplating paying for alternative transportation. Drummer Artemis Pyle later recalled that the plane had been leaking fuel during a previous leg of the tour, and mechanics had been working on the engines between flights. The NTSB investigation determined that the crash was caused by fuel exhaustion and engine failure due to poor maintenance and an improperly functioning engine gauge. However, questions have persisted about why these maintenance issues weren't addressed before the fateful flight, why the pilots didn't make their fuel emergency clear to air traffic control sooner, and whether the charter company had been cutting corners on safety to save costs. Adding to the eerie quality of the story is the cover of the band's Street Survivors album, released just 3 days before the crash. The original cover featured the band members standing amid flames. After the crash, the record company quickly recalled the album and replaced it with an alternate cover out of respect for the victims. The crash effectively ended Lynyrd Skynyrd as they had existed up to that point. The band had been at the height of their popularity, with hits like Sweet Home Alabama and Free Bird defining Southern rock. Van Zant in particular was recognized as both the voice and soul of the band, writing many of their most iconic songs. Years later, surviving members would reform the band with Ronnie's younger brother, Johnny Van Zant, taking over as lead vocalist. But many fans argue that something intangible was lost in that Mississippi forest, a raw authenticity that had made the original lineup so special. In the decades since, various band members have given interviews describing the horror of the crash and its aftermath. Pyle, who despite his own injuries walked through the woods to find help, has spoken about how the experience forever changed him. Guitarist Gary Rossington, the last surviving original member, has described his multiple brushes with death during and after the crash. Was it simply mechanical failure and human error that brought down the plane, or were there deeper systemic issues in the charter aviation industry that contributed to the tragedy? Could more stringent oversight have prevented the loss of these musical legends? Number 1, Patsy Cline, country music's brightest star falls. Why did one of the 20th century's most influential vocalists board a small plane in dangerous weather conditions? On March 5, 1963, country music lost its first female superstar when Patsy Cline died in a plane crash near Camden, Tennessee. She was just 30 years old and at the peak of her career. Cline had performed a benefit concert in Kansas City and was eager to return home to Nashville. Despite warnings about deteriorating weather conditions, she decided not to take a bus with her band but instead accepted an offer from her manager, Randy Hughes, to fly her in his single-engine Piper Comanche. Also aboard the ill-fated flight were fellow country stars Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins. The weather that evening included heavy rain and high winds, conditions that would challenge even experienced pilots. Hughes, who was piloting the plane, had his pilot's license but was not instrument rated, meaning he was only certified to fly in clear conditions where he could navigate visually rather than by instruments. As darkness fell and the weather worsened, Hughes apparently became disoriented. The plane crashed in the forest just 90 miles from Nashville, instantly killing all 4 occupants. The wreckage wasn't discovered until the following morning after an extensive search. What makes Klein's death particularly poignant are the premonitions she reportedly expressed about her own mortality in the weeks leading up to the crash. According to friends, she had been telling people she didn't expect to live much longer. After her final performance, she allegedly told the audience, "Honey, I can see the future, and honey, you're not in it." There's also the matter of what might have been. Klein had broken barriers for women in country music, crossing over to pop success with hits like Crazy, Walking After Midnight, and I Fall to Pieces. Her rich, emotional voice influenced countless artists who followed, from Loretta Lynn to Linda Ronstadt to today's country stars. Country music historian Robert K. Oerman has suggested that had Klein lived, she might have become as influential globally as her contemporary Elvis Presley, noting that her vocal technique and emotional delivery transcended genre boundaries in a way few other artists have achieved. Questions linger about the decisions that led to the crash. Why did Hughes attempt the flight despite his limited experience and the poor weather conditions? Did Klein's eagerness to get home to her children override caution? Some have suggested that the culture of touring musicians in that era, with its emphasis on making the next show no matter what, contributed to the risk-taking. Adding another layer to the story is that Willie Nelson, who wrote Klein's hit Crazy, was reportedly offered a seat on the plane but declined. One can only imagine how music history might have been altered had he accepted. In the years since her death, Klein has been the subject of movies, museum exhibits, and countless tribute albums. She was the first female solo artist inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Yet her most enduring legacy is the music itself, recordings that continue to move listeners with their emotional authenticity and technical brilliance. Every time a plane carrying a celebrity crashes, we search for answers. Was it simply mechanical failure, pilot error, weather conditions? Or something more sinister? While investigators provide official explanations, the public often remains skeptical. Is it our refusal to accept the randomness of tragedy? Or could there be more to these stories than what's found in official reports?